All right, I guess we will go ahead and get started. And I'm just really excited about this presentation, about this coffee break. And we are here with Mike Lee. He's with Specified Controls. He told me today he's been there from the beginning. So he is the expert, but they have a range of products that they offer, and all from VAV diffusers that I'm aware of, control products themselves, fan controls. Today we are specifically talking about their remote control operation of a damper, of a manual damper. And I guess I'm really excited about this. I see this application used a lot on the sheet metal side of our industry, where I live in and have been in for 20 plus years. And I'm really excited to have you guys learn more about this and how it could benefit projects that have many hard lid ceilings. It's a great opportunity. But I'm going to turn over the presentation over to Mike. Will be for about 15 minutes. And if you have questions, please enter them in the comment box, and hopefully Mike can pick those up and help us as we go along, or we can do questions at the very end as well. But I really appreciate Mike for doing this and taking the opportunity with us. But hopefully all week we can all learn a little bit. So Mike, thank you.
Absolutely. So if you have any questions at all, please put those in there, as she said, or just unmute your mic and shout them out. It won't affect me at all. So really quickly, as was mentioned, Specified Controls is a manufacturer of HVAC controls. We're located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Been around for roughly 9 years at this point, but the company that is our parent company, we've been making controls for almost 30 years now. We identified our area, our niche, our gray area in the controls world. We always jokingly say we exist between the thermostat controlling your unit and the DDC system controlling your whole building. We're those controls that fit right in the middle there, that there's not a lot of options for. From zoning to damper control like this that we're going to talk about today, we really fit into that that gray area where it just doesn't make sense to put in that full building automation system, but you need more than just that Honeywell thermostat on the wall. So that's the thing we always joke about. So let's jump right into it. Let's start talking about balancing dampers in general. First and foremost, of course, we all know the three different types of balancing dampers. You've got the manual damper, you've got the cable damper, or in its couple different iterations, and then you've got the electronic or the battery powered versions of a balancing damper. Manual dampers are going to have hand quads. They're going to be inexpensive. Obviously, one of the drawbacks to a manual damper is it's got it's manually adjustable, meaning that you have to be able to access it. You have to get up into the ceiling or up into the ductwork to be able to adjust it. So that's the drawback. It's of course less expensive, but you don't have really a remote way to adjust it. The cable dampers, you got the wall and ceiling adjustment options with those. Limited length of cable is an issue at times. And the limited ability to turn it, as what we always say. So usually your cable damper has to be on basically a single plane, meaning it's difficult to have it turn around one wall and then turn around another wall. As an example, if you want to locate the adjustment positioner in a different place. So it's limited on its ability to on where you can put that adjuster with a cable damper. And then a lack of position indication in most cases. There are some cable dampers out there that do have some degree of position indication or position options, but it's not as simple or as easy as I know where it is, or I've been, I can see where it's been positioned. It's more about a knob and if you turned it too much or not enough. So that's the position indication is a little bit of a confusing component to the cable damper world. And then cable dampers are obviously more costly than a manual damper, rightfully so. They give us the ability to adjust. Then we get into electronic dampers, of course, all kinds of different options for adjustment. In terms of wall boxes and switches and the ability to put those in the ceiling or wrap them around a corner or put all of them into one area, like in a mechanical room, so that there is no, wall plates out in the space. As an example, if the design is to be more or less cluttered with those types of things. And then we have no issue with length of wire or length of run of wire when it comes to our electronic dampers. Most manufacturers will say something like 50 feet is acceptable, and then they can go further if they need to. We really don't have that issue. As long as we are aware of the length that you need it, we can make that happen, no problem. And then turns and bends. One of the really nice reasons for an electronic balancing damper is the ability to run that wire wherever we want to, and turn it and bend it and run it through very small areas in between walls and things like that. And then most electronic balancing dampers have a lack of position indication of any kind. And that's one of the major drawbacks is just having no idea what position it's in most cases. There is one manufacturer out there that does have a position indication option. And we'll talk about them in just a minute, or talk about that option in just a minute. But the other thing is, electronic balancing dampers have almost always been just a pretty expensive option. Dennis, I'll get you an answer here in just a second. I see your question. I don't believe so. However, we'll talk a little bit more about it and see if it answers your question. But still more costly typically with electronic dampers over cable dampers. They usually, traditionally speaking, have cost more. And so what we want to talk about is take the manual out, because a manual balancing damper is a manual balancing damper. And when it's ideal or it's the right time to use a manual balancing damper, you'll use a manual balancing damper because it is the least expensive, most cost-effective way to balance the system. But when we need a remote or the ability to adjust remotely, we have to go to cable and electronic. And the really nice thing about the adjustment of a cable damper, of course, is it's mechanical, right? You just turn a knob, you turn a screw, you turn some kind of device, and mechanically it adjusts the damper. So that makes it a very nice option. However, very limited on placement of that adjustment piece, very limited on the length of the wire or cable in that situation. And most of the time don't know the position. There is some product out there like a Bowden cable situation that can have some position indication, but it's not as accurate as we would probably like to see it. And then the cable damper options tend to be less attractive. I've run into many designers and architects who would not allow that cable damper piece to be out in the space. They did not like the aesthetics of that. When we get to the electronic side on the remote balancing dampers, no matter the manufacturer, it's got electronic adjustment. For the most part, I will say unlimited placement and unlimited length of wire, especially with our product. We've tested our product up to 2,500 feet in length in terms of powering the damper. No issue whatsoever as long as we have the right wire. It's all about the gauge of wire on that. And then the placement, of course, we can put those, because of that length, we can put those wall plates or the adjustment inputs, we can put those anywhere we want. We can provide the position with our product. And there's another manufacturer that can as well. And then we're going to be a more attractive option when it comes to those designers, those architects that are looking for something that is a little less intrusive or less not noticeable in the space. And then historically, electronic balancing dampers have been more expensive than your cable damper would have been. But now we have our version, the specified controls product. And the electronic versions that we always get objections for when we start talking about electronic versus cable versus manual, the objections are always, it's too costly. The motors could fail. What if the motor fails? There's battery issues. There's concerns about the battery powering the actual damper itself. complaints that the facilities manager or the people working in the building lose the controllers. There is no position indication, or position indication is confusing, is a complaint we often hear. We hear a lot about difficulty with the TMB to dial in those dampers successfully on the electronic side. We hear questions or issues of the quality of the dampers. We've heard that many times about the actual quality of the balancing damper and the motors themselves. And then of course, wiring concerns. We hear the issue of, this literature says I can only go 50 feet. What if I need to go 300 feet? Things like that. Those are usually the objections that we hear. But what's important about our product and why we are distinguished enough to be different is that the round or rectangular, either one, our damper is heavy gauge commercial grade damper with a blade seal in the round. In the rectangular, we do not have blade seals. It's not a leakage rated damper, but it is a very tight damper. And there's a full 100% closed position with all of our options in terms of our balancing dampers. It clearly closes. It doesn't just spin. The motor itself is a very high torque motor for this type of application. It is a 9-volt actuator with proportional control. All of the other manufacturers use a 12-volt actuator, and that 12-volt actuator is literally a 360-degree spinning actuator. In most cases, they're actually clock actuators. And what they do is they just spin. They just sit and spin and continually spin. And so it's almost impossible to know what position they're actually in because of that. We provide a proportional control, and that proportional control is literally just like a 0 to 10 actuator that you're used to. Just think of this as a 0 to 9 actuator. 1 volt, we're at 10%. 9 volts, we're at 100%. So as it says, as I can explain or tell you, that when we want to be at 50%, we send 4.5 volts to that motor, and that's the proportional control. So it gives us precise positioning of the damper. I can literally plug this in, as you can see on the screen right now, and you can see that potentiometer. I can plug that in to the port, and I can put that damper whatever position I want right then and there, and I know it's at that position. So I don't really need damper position indication or feedback, because I am dictating to that damper exactly what position for it to be in. And then of course the controller itself, as I mentioned, it's proportional. It's not just a button or a switch. And then of course the aesthetics of this. We have all these great options in terms of ceiling and wall adjustment. And the question was brought up about, is there anything for the face of a diffuser? We have options that would fit into the diffuser itself. We also have options that are round, small, what we would refer to as a pass-through for the ceiling tiles or ceiling, hard ceiling itself. Those would work, but nothing that is actually built into the actual face of the diffuser. What we typically would do, or what we suggest, is that you would use just our what we would refer to as our port, and take that port and literally just a little piece of Velcro and attach it to the face, inside the face plate or the plaque, or inside one of the cones on the diffuser, to allow you to be able to access it really easily. But we've done that hundreds of times with just a simple port and some double back tape or some Velcro. There is nothing that I'm aware of where it's built into the actual face of a diffuser. Not a bad idea, something that we in theory could do, but is not readily available, and probably the main reason for that is concerns by diffuser manufacturers about airflow, is my guess. So let's see here. So when we start talking about balancing dampers and adjustment, for those of you that have used electronic balancing dampers before, you might recognize one of these as one of the controllers you've used before. And what you'll see here is all of the ones on the screen all incorporate something like this. They incorporate a 3-position switch. and it is either open or closed. And it, the damper's either going one way or going the other way. And how that rocker or 3-position switch works is pretty simple. Typically up is open, neutral or not made. The switch is not made. It's not moving. There's no power. And then down reverses that, and it goes for the closed direction. This is fine, and this lets us adjust it remotely. The problem is that we have no idea what position we're in. We have no clue where that damper is, and it can literally just spin and spin and spin. And this is a negative to that, because with our product, we are going to give you the ability to actually determine and decide what position you want it to be in. If you think you want it at 50%, you turn this to 50% and you push the button and it goes to 50%. If you want it at 75, you turn it to 75 and do the same thing. If the balancer is utilizing this, it becomes extremely simple, because the balancer puts their hood over the diffuser or the grill, and then they turn this until they get the CFM they want. And now you know what position it is in. Returning, or later on down the line, if you want to change that position, there is no actual means by which for us to provide that feedback. But what is really important is to know I can turn this to 0, and then I can turn it to 60, 70, 80, 90. I can do whatever I want with it in terms of the proportional control. So think of this, I always say, think of this as more of a control damper than a actual balancing damper, from the standpoint of it's fully adjustable and properly adjustable over the other options in the marketplace. The Young regulator version does have that damper feedback, but the problem that we run into with those, and the biggest complaint that we hear with those, is that there's technically only 5 positions that it can indicate: open, closed, and then 3 positions in between. So we don't really know what position it's in. We pretty close, but it's not really accurate. It's just resistors telling us what the voltage is when it comes back. And so it's not really overly accurate. It's a nice little feature, but it doesn't give you the control that our product will, in terms of dictating exactly what position for it to be in. We've had a lot of contractors utilize the Young Regulator brand, and Young Regulator makes a great product. But when they have tried ours and used ours, they found that they really, really appreciate how much simpler it is to actually dial in this damper successfully with our adjuster. So that is the big difference, or the big piece to ours, is that we can proportionally control it completely. So when we talk about our SC-BAL product, the balancing damper product, is a true damper positioning, unlimited length on the wire. We can make it as long as we want. High quality damper, virtually any size available that you'd ever need. Very high torque motor, all tested to 1 million cycles. So the motor itself is just an extremely high quality, very well made motor. And let's be honest, balancing dampers are not made to move a lot. So unlikely for us to have a failure on a damper that's only probably in its lifetime going to move 5 or 6 times. That's in reality. But the most important other thing to bring up is the cost effectiveness of this. It's extremely cost effective. We have built this damper with the intention of being as cost competitive as possible with the almost always lesser expensive cable damper. So our goal is to be a very cost competitive option. That sums up the presentation on our product. Thank you for joining us, and I'll toss it back to you.
Okay, Mike, thanks so much for that presentation. Is there any other questions? Does anyone have any? Again, you can reach out via the chat or go ahead and just unmute and talk to us that way. But again, I'm really excited about this product and what it can do in our market, and it can help us with the balancer. I'm sure would make his life much easier.
Yes.
So it's a good way to go. In closing, please go ahead with questions. And also just wanted to remind you, next week, same time, same place, we'll be here at 10:30 Next week, we're going to be talking with Aon, and they're going to have I believe, a virtual tour on their new R&D and testing facility. So that may be of interest to you as well. So hopefully we can join you then. Mike, any other questions that showed up on your end?
I don't see any. The only question we had was about the port piece, and I think I got that answered.
Okay.
So
Great.
other than that, if there's any questions at all about the product itself, or you want some literature, of course, everything's available on specifiedcontrols.com, or if, obviously, of course, reach out to Long. They'll be happy to provide the submittals for you.
Yes, we would. All right. Thanks again, Mike, for your time, and thanks for everyone for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.